What up guys, my name is Megan, and today we're talking all about my May wrap-up. May was a weird reading month for me. I didn't start reading until 1 week into the month. I thought I had read a lot less books than I did, so I'm pretty proud of myself. But let's go ahead and jump into stats. I read a total of 8 books this month, with a total page count being 2,198. And for my genres, age groups, whatever, I read 1 middle grade book, which was an ARC. I read 1 nonfiction memoir. I read 3 YA dystopian, which were also a reread, 1 adult thriller, 1 adult smutty romance, and then 1 YA historical fiction. So in terms of my reading tastes, I'm wondering if they're changing a little, because this is my second month reading a nonfiction, and that's kind of crazy. Like I said, I never read nonfiction, and suddenly I'm like not really into it. Obviously I only read 1, but that's a lot more, so I'm more into it than I thought I would ever be, and I think that's going to continue. There's a lot of nonfiction that are catching my eye right now, so am I learning? Apparently. And then also 1 YA historical fiction. I don't think, okay, that's a lie. I have read historical fiction before, but I've never read a young adult historical fiction, and spoiler, I loved it. But I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into the specific books I read. The first book I read this month was Learn My Lesson by Katee Roberts. In April, I read Desperate Measures by Katee Roberts, and that is part of a companion series, and so Learn My Lesson is the second of that series. It is called the, I think, Wicked Villains series, and this is the adult smutty romance in which it takes Disney characters or fairy tale characters and puts them together in very adult ways. So Learn My Lesson is about Hercules, Hades, and Megara, Meg, and it is about those 3, so it is a polyamorous relationship. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. It was fun, but it wasn't as good as the first one, because in this book there's a lot more emotional baggage that the characters deal with, and I don't mind emotional stuff in a smutty book. What I do mind is when they're in the middle of a dirty scene and then all of a sudden the character's going through all this emotional stuff in the middle of that scene, and they kind of think it all through, and then it's weird to me to be thinking deep thoughts while doing dirty things, and then when they go back to doing the dirty things, I'm like, wait, didn't you just have an emotional moment and you really want to be doing these things? But anyways, I mean, personal preference. This series deals with BDSM, consensual non-consent. If you do not feel well with those things, don't read this series. But if you enjoy just a fun twist on childhood favorites, go for it. The next book I read was The Witches of Willow Cove by Josh Roberts. This was the middle grade arc that I read. I'm not going to go too into detail about this book because I have a whole review video on it that I will link above and below. So this book was 4 out of 5 stars. It was amazing, all about a young witch who discovers her and a bunch of others in her town are magical, and it's all about them finding a teacher and then having to fight evil. It's really good, so fun. Go check out that video if you're interested. The next 3 books that I read, I'm also not going to go too into detail about, because I reread The Hunger Games, and they were fantastic. Loved it. Great experience, and I vlogged the whole thing, so you can go watch that vlog too, linked up and down. So yes, loved them. They're rereads, 5 out of 5 stars. Rewatched the movies too, and those were also beloved favorites. The next book I read was my adult thriller, and I actually read this because of a book club me, my mom, and my older sister are doing, and so yeah, you get to hear my thoughts as well as their input on my thoughts. We read The Cellar by Natasha Preston. This is a book about a young girl named Summer who is kidnapped and then kept down in a cellar with other women, and it's about their survival. It has multiple point of views, that being Summer, her boyfriend who's looking for her, and then the man who is keeping her. This book I gave 2 out of 5 stars, and honestly, I'm so angry about it because this book could have been so good. It's really interesting. The characters had so much potential. Like it's just, I had to keep reading. And honestly, there's a second book out and I might try and pick it up too, because the story, I just want to know more. The whole time you're reading the story, you just want to know more. But unfortunately, you're never given the more. Things are never explained. Characters are very one-dimensional, so you don't really understand their full feelings of things. It's got a whole bunch of problems, but I do think if you like are just interested in like a really compelling thriller, but you don't mind being angry at the end, read it. Like, it's not, I don't know. I had very complicated feelings, and both my sister and my mom fully agreed. They said the book is so interesting and they almost wish it was like revisited and rewritten and redone by the author, just with more information. But I don't think we're gonna get that. The next book I read was my nonfiction memoir, and that is How to Be a Good Creature by Montgomery. This book was fantastic. 5 out of 5 stars. The audiobook for this, that's how I consumed this story, was amazing. The author narrates it, and what this story is Montgomery is like an animal researcher, and she's worked with animals and been around animals her whole life. And so she recounts like 13 life lessons, 13 stories in the tale of what she's learned from 13 different animals, if that makes sense. It was magical. Like, this story is so good. I also love animals very much, and I really just love to listen about other people's point of views. And she really, like, when she talks, I'm gonna guess you can still understand like how much emotion she has about these animals when you physically read it, but it is beautiful the way she talks about them and the way she reflects on how animals have affected her life. It is just phenomenal and amazing, and it's not too heavy and it's not too like light, if that makes sense. It's not too like all butterflies and rainbows. You read this story and you really do start to love not only just nature and animals, but you really do start to like feel like the love of just humanity and like people. And sometimes we just need a memoir or a novel that's gonna make you sit there and be like, thank God. Thank you for the world. And so yeah, it's very inspiring. It's so good, and I highly recommend it. The last book I read this month was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This was the YA historical fiction. It's about a young Lithuanian girl who her and her family are taken to a labor camp by the Soviets, and it is all about them surviving and trying to live with the circumstances they are in. This book was heartbreaking and so touching, and yet there were also very sweet moments, very innocent moments, and it really focuses on how surviving depends not only on yourself, but on the people around you and the things you put out into the world. I think this book has the best characters ever. They're so amazing. From our main character to her mom, to her brother, to her maybe love interest. It is amazing. And if you ever want to read a World War II book that's not focused on German concentration camps, and you want to know more of what happened, because to be honest, I studied World War II every year in middle school and high school. I didn't know that the Soviet Union had labor camps as well. I didn't know anything about it. And in the author's note, which I highly recommend, always read the author's note, she talks about she didn't know either. And she's Lithuanian. Ruta Sepetys is Lithuanian, and she didn't know this had happened in history. And so if you don't know about it, read this book, because you're gonna just be amazed. You know, Germany wasn't the only bad guys. This book, it tells of a artistic young girl who is learning to be hopeful and yet accepting that she's angry. And I think that's just really important. I will say the audiobook is really good. The narrator does a very good job, but this book does deal in flashbacks. Not always, but there are flashbacks in this novel. And when you consume it via audio, there's no like announcement or any like change to signify that you're in a flashback now. So the first couple flashbacks that I had heard, I was really confused. I was like, wait, when did we get here? When did these people show up? And then I kind of realized what was happening. So if you're gonna do an audiobook, just kind of be aware and be ready. But I think physical would probably be the best way to easily transition from the regular prose to the flashback to the whatever. There are 2 books that I'm currently reading that I'm crossing over from May to June. The first one being Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I started this and had the full intention of finishing it in May. Unfortunately, that has not happened. I am probably 200 pages in and have been for like 2 weeks. This book is a prequel all about President Snow and his experience becoming a mentor and living in the capital and trying to rise to presidential titles. I have found the first 200 pages of this book very interesting and very compelling, but at the same time, it's very slow. I made the comment in my vlogs about how the books, each of the Hunger Games books surprised me on how much of the book took place in a certain setting. Like in the first book, how much time specifically took place in the Hunger Games, and in the second book, how much time was not spent in the Hunger Games. And this book is only 500 pages. I mean, it looks a lot bigger, but it's only 500 pages, and I'm 200 pages in, and we're still not in the Hunger Games. I think we still got like a week to go to the Hunger Games in this novel, and I'm kind of like, what's happening? So it's slow, even though it's good, and I'm just having trouble picking it back up, to be honest. The next book that I'm currently in the middle of, about halfway through, I'm listening to it on audio, so I don't know page count for that, is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is my first N.K. Jemisin novel I've ever read, and it's really good. The audiobook is kind of jarring. There's a lot of characters, basically. This is a urban fantasy, and it's just a really interesting concept. Basically, what has happened is New York City has become a person, and each borough of New York has become a person, and they have to try and find each other and protect each other from an evil that is attacking New York. Like I said, it's got a lot of characters, obviously, just from the thing, a lot of different point of views. The audiobook that handles it very well, though, it's just a lot for my little brain to handle, and it's really good right now. I just have to keep listening, honestly. I haven't listened to it for a couple days, but I think that's more of me being lazy than the book being good or bad. But yes, so hopefully I will finish those 2 books in June and be able to put them on my June wrap-up, which will be here sooner than I think. I don't really have a very set TBR. I kind of am going to just go with the flow and read as much as I want, because like I said, I feel like May I didn't read a lot, so I'm really wanting to jump into June and read as much as I can. Really do want to read a lot of like queer lit, so I'm going to tell you like a few things that I'm reading. I do plan on reading This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This is a queer romance. I'm not 100% sure. I know there's like a time war and there's correspondence between 2 spies on either side, and I'm excited to read it. It's very short, so I think I should fly through it. And like I said, queer romance, very excited. Another thing that I'm really wanting to read more of this month, obviously, I'm really wanting to read more. I want to read more diversely. I want to read from more your own voices. I want to read experiences that are not like my own. Because of the times, obviously, we need to be more educated and learn a little bit faster what other people are going through, and I myself really do. So like I said earlier, I'm wanting to read more nonfiction. I currently don't know what nonfiction I will be trying to tackle this month, but I have to just see what my library has and or my local bookstores. I really just have to go search and see what calls to me. But for fiction novels that I'm wanting to cover, I want to read Front Desk by Kelly Yang. This book looks so good to me. It is a middle grade book, but it is about Mia Tang. And basically Mia Tang lives in a motel with her parents where they work, and she works the front desk, and her parents are secretly housing homeless immigrants in this motel. And I think that is a very obviously risky situation. And so I would love to read what it's like to be an immigrant and then help other immigrants in this country specifically. And it is Own Voices. Kelly Yang actually lived this type of experience. So I'm just excited to see what it is. And it looks fun, even though I know it'll be very important. Those are just 2 of the reads I'm planning on getting to. Everything else, I'm kind of just seeing what happens. That's all I have to talk about. Those are all the books I read in May, and some of the books I plan to finish and read in June. And with that, I think I'm gonna go get started on that reading. I'll see y'all later.